Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Audio APIs A Game Changer webinar. Great to have you all watching. I see we have some viewers already. As you guys are trickling in, does anybody want to shout out who you are, where you're from? Might be a little shy, understandable.
It always happens.
Welcome. Awesome. Great to have you, Bryan. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about today. Bryan and myself have been speaking about this topic a lot over the past couple weeks. Been following things that have been happening at Sounder, things that have been happening across the industry. So really excited to discuss this with you all. As we're going through our talk track and different slides on the screen, feel free to jump in with questions or anything else you'd like to add. But I will also save time at the end for questions as well, so we can do a Q&A session. Awesome. So starting us off with a little intros, Bryan, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Bryan Barletta. I'm one of the partners at Sounds Profitable. We're a research and advocacy firm, and our entire focus is to grow the podcasting space, both through listenership and monetization. Do that through newsletters, live events, leading research. And I'm really excited to say that at South by Southwest on March 9th, we'll have the official South by Southwest X podcasting event. And we're really, really excited to make that the full schedule announcement later this week.
Yeah, that was awesome to hear. It's the first full day podcasting event at South by. Do I have that right?
Yeah. And so there's been a lot of other podcasting stuff there, but it's mostly about specific companies and their own content and all of that. And there's been a lot of panels that have been throughout all of South by in other tracks. And so this is our big swing together as an industry. There's no real branding on this except for why podcasting. And the goal here is to show South by why we deserve a place and why we deserve our own track in 2025. And we're getting great response for it so far.
Awesome. Super excited about that. I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Ryan Coughlin, the head of product at Sounder. A little bit about Sounder for those who don't know. We are an audio data intelligence company. So we're committed to leveraging AI and ML solutions. We're all focused on trying to unlock the value of audio content. We see a lot of great content out there, and we're trying to make sure that creators and others across the industry have the ability to unlock the true monetization potential. Creators have the ability to unlock their growth potential. So anything in that space, we're really focused on. What brings me here today is we're coming off the heels of a launch for us. So we opened up our API that you can learn more about at sounder.ai/API. This allows you to use our low-cost, high-quality transcription solution. There's more coming soon, more features and functionality that if you're interested, definitely stay tuned. But that's kind of what Bryan and I have been thinking about and wanted to speak more broadly for the industry as a whole, what this can mean and other things like it. So throwing that out there, and we can come back to that if you guys have questions. So, Bryan, thinking about the timeline of podcasting, it's certainly, we've had a lot happen over the past decades, including, if we go back to 2000 when the RSS feed was actually defined and launched, and Apple Podcasts reaching 1 billion subscribers in 2013, podcasting hitting $1 billion in US revenue in 2021. And we look at last year, a lot of developments on the AI front, and a lot happened even in the past few weeks in the world of transcription or AI as it relates to audio. Any thoughts or open questions that you have, or things that you're looking forward to?
Well, I mean, I think it's always interesting to look at it and be like, wow, we've been doing this for like 20 plus years. And then realize things like dynamic ad insertion was like around 2014, 2016. Someone can correct me, and there's a fight over who really invented it. And I don't want to get into that part, but like, and then the boom during the pandemic and everything, like each of these things, if we scale out, and there was a great write up in Pod News that had like some artwork showing like the length of time the industry has versus like the book industry and TV and radio. It's a short period of time. These are some really cool key points here, but you see it, right? Like the adoption of it, and then or the creation of the technology, and then it takes a while to get to a billion, but then it's shorter time for us to get into ad revenue becoming a bigger thing. And then the AI transcription, I mean, heck, if we zoomed in on that, a lot of companies I worked for years before would be machine learning companies that would now are probably rebranding to AI companies. And I think the coolest thing about last year is if you look at it, a lot of people built their own technology and then realized that they could adopt other technology quicker and faster and move on from those first steps. And some people won out with their technology being the solution, but a lot of other people realized that fighting over that first step wasn't where innovation happened, right? Like if there was a winner, if there was an obvious solution, if it made things easier, it's more about what's next, what's step 2, 3, 4, and 5, where's the unique ideas coming from. And I really think we're going to be looking at 2023 and what happened with AI in that for a long time under a magnifying glass.
Totally. Yeah. Like, so many new developments in the Gen AI front last year, everybody kind of scrambling to figure out how to rebrand, like you said, but also like how to start incorporating things into their stack and how to, stay at the cutting edge. I think you're right. It's like, if you look at the last couple years and the next couple years, while there was this kind of long, slow burn to build up to get to where we are, it's turning into that like inflection point where you can see a lot of potential and a lot of new stuff starting to happen. The just like in the last week, I saw Apple announce for Apple Podcasts for creators transcription,
which is a huge deal.
Updating the RSS feed so that they can take this. Any thoughts on that? Like just as one of these big jumps forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're beholden to the apps to what data we can send that they'll receive. I mean, we can send everything we want, but it's only some small podcast apps and web players that will utilize all of it, which means it's hard to get adoption or interest behind a lot of it. So when Apple adopts something, does it put pressure on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and Google in general? Like, yeah, I mean, these things changed dynamics a little bit there too. In this example, I mean, with YouTube focusing on podcasting and YouTube already offering transcripts, maybe the pressure was the other way around. But it's exciting to see these things pop up. They might not be the innovations a lot of us on this webinar are dying for Apple and Spotify to pass. Maybe perhaps more real-time numbers, a little bit more feedback from the app data that they have. But anything that they do to bring the industry forward is exciting, especially if it enables everybody in the chain to engage with it at their own choice, right? And transcripts, me and you were talking a little bit about this before. I think transcripts leads into a big part of what we want to talk about in this webinar, is that access to tools to allow people to innovate instead of fighting over that first step, which to me, I think first step is really transcription for a lot of these things, for contextualization, for data, for so many other ideas. Being able to say I'm on Megaphone right now, and Megaphone doesn't currently offer the ability for me to pass transcription. It is not trivial, but it is not incredibly difficult to make a feed burner like wrapper basically for my RSS feed. And that wrapper could call my RSS feed and pull in all the aspects there. I could use the Sounder API and I could transcribe my podcast. I could have that file output to a specific location and I could have it injected into my new RSS feed. And so now I can have the transcripts that I choose automated and built out myself and pushed into Apple Podcasts, even while being on a host that isn't supporting Apple Podcasts. And things like that mean that we're not fighting over, okay, well, whose transcription is right? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm the publisher. Whatever I put in there is right. Okay, well, how do we get it over there? Well, do I have to pay another service to build that wrapper for me? Honestly, I mean, you could. FeedBurner and things like that still exist, but the question becomes, how difficult is that lift, especially as we're moving towards pre-bid being a big part of podcast advertising in the near future, where publishers can stand up their own effectively ad server SSP type solution. The lift on that and the ability to have some ownership and control is a big deal. And I think we're going to see more of that as we get past step one.
Yeah. That's well said. And I think like the ability to take advantage of this for Apple, like it unlocks a lot of potential. Like you were just talking about pre-bid, and it makes me think about like even pre-publish, enabling creators to insert things into their feed, insert transcripts, what kind of stuff that can innovate on the advertising side and monetization side. There's a lot of cool stuff happening there. A lot of we've also seen a lot from Spotify with like the accessibility, automatically showing transcripts. So I know we're getting ahead a little bit, but yeah, just really excited to see what the next year holds for us. So
yeah. But yeah, I think we're going to be moving off of step one. I think either everybody's going to be using a very common vendor for transcription, or all using a similar vendor overall. And I think that really moves us away from there, and we can all agree what the next step is. I mean, look, if we look at what is a download and what is ad delivered and all of that, and why we have the IAB certification and everything, it's because we all built separate things and then had to come together to figure out the rules to govern it. And it's not all the same. Are there areas now we can learn from that and say, okay, well, we could all build our own thing, or we could kind of condense, right? There could be a few winners or a few more trusted solutions. And to me, that's exciting, because I want to get out of step one. I mean, last year, while there was all this AI stuff, we didn't particularly innovate in our space. We were still filling holes from attribution and analytics providers being acquired, and the race for transcriptions, brand safety and suitability, contextualization. And so that was a lot of people gaining that step one ground and not innovating on it, taking it further than that, which is really the value prop, right? What do I do with this? Not, okay, I have it, cool. It's so easy for everybody to get transcripts. Like, I think it's mind-numbingly easy, but it's how do I efficiently use it? What is my view on how do I use it? Is it rolling up individual episodes into a show? Is it each individual episode matters? Do I chunk out sections of a show and determine that the brand safety guidelines for each section matters differently, like the news does, right? With their different segments. That perspective is only possible when we stop figuring out like, okay, how do we transcribe?
Yeah, I like where you're going. And I think like, I was thinking about I was trying to like inventory all the different applications for a transcript, and like the list kept getting longer, but there's like on the listener side, on the consumer side, accessibility, being able to scroll along and see what you're listening to. There's, as we were, in development for the API we just launched, we had a lot of use cases that were like, we're trying to build search and recommendations. We're trying to build podcast discovery, and we want to have like a deeper way to let users navigate through the podcast. We heard even from like, on the ad tech side, like audio, like different DSPs wanting to make it so that they could have custom targeting logic, all of this stuff. And everybody was kind of stuck at this step one, where it's like, okay, well, the first thing we need is the transcript. What's the way to go about it? So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about that, because like, as a product manager, it's so important to me to be able to experiment, test, start with things that are small before you feel like you've got the beginning of an idea, that you can start to show and shop with users and shop with customers and get feedback. How do you see like what do you think is the most important kind of shift we can see in the world of podcast transcription, given that it's so foundational to all these things?
Yeah, I mean, the second it's live, we can start surveying people on it, right? I see Paul from Signal Hill in here, and there's a handful of partners that are really proficient at surveying people based on the digital signals that are coming in, and making sure you're getting in front of the person who listened to the podcast, specifically on Apple Podcasts, on episodes that you've started using transcripts, to see if they engage in it, right? We don't know what they're going to do, right? Does this create a more engaged environment? Are people going to have the phone on longer? Some of those things aren't going to be things we'll see, right? Does that the question there becomes, does Apple then start exploring that, right? Like, we can see if there's plenty of companies out there that was it Voxelize and Asha have solutions for search engine or podcast search optimization, right? Can they take into account now, because they have the transcripts, and see if the search is taking care of that? Because Apple and Spotify and all these partners aren't necessarily going to tell us about that. So what does that tell you what to prioritize? I mean, heck, for listener protection, there's a handful of times that I've clicked into a podcast because of the categories it was listed in, and the content definitely did not align with the categories. Can we make sure that the content is actually those self-identified categories? Like, is that something we're going to see them govern in the future overall? Or I think that we don't know where this will be used or how it will be used. Heck, honestly, it might just improve search. It might just improve advertising. It might, I don't know if there's a lot of listener interest in seeing that. But what I will tell you is that we have some info on that already, right? We have Amazon Music has transcripts for some of their shows on there. Spotify has that. And those partners could share it. And we'd be able to have like an idea around it. But for me personally, the amount of times I space out, and I remember like the last word or sentence, but it's not easy to get back there, just skipping back 30 seconds at a time or scrubbing. Being able to select the text and go back to that, I'm super excited for that world.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see all the use for that for myself as a listener, but also as somebody trying to develop solutions in the podcast space.
Yeah. Because I mean, like that, it is kind of a black box when we send these things over to Apple. Like, they make choices and changes based on that, all of that. But the more data they have, the more we hope and expect from them. I mean, I think most of us would like there to be some sort of advertising component within the Apple Podcast app, similar to how Overcast does it, or the App Store even. And if it can take better into account the contextual relevancy of a show, or search is even better, that's really exciting. I mean, most people are not finding benefit in the search. It tends to be a joke in a lot of the platforms for what you can actually find in there. If that changes, then does that change the dynamic of how people discover podcasts? How people better find, I don't listen to every episode of a show, but I always listen to the episodes where they talk about cars. Well, can the recommendation identify that and start sharing more car shows with me in general, instead of just episodes from the show where they talk about it? It's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, something that you said that rings especially true for me is like the fact that we don't know what, how this is going to be used, and where 5 years from now is going to be the most critical application of transcription. One of the things that was important for us when we brought our kind of open access API into market, enabling it so that you can just create an account on our site, get an API key, and start playing around, is, we expect in order to get to that point, wherever we are in a couple of years, there's going to be a lot of experimentation and playing around, that where a lot of things might fail, and then you try a new idea and all of that stuff. So I think, we were focused on trying to get the industry out of the world of 12-month contracts, just so that you can get access to something so foundational. Like the audio file, the transcript file is like such a small thing, but it seems to unlock a lot of product development and a lot of different use cases and experimentation.
And that barrier, that 12-month contract, look, I mean, the pricing has only gone down with transcription, but like, it's not efficient enough. And the 12-month contract is really flawed, because there's so many things I can prioritize in podcasting. I mean, we saw the dip in the iOS 17 downloads, but also everybody who saw the dip because had looked at historical and seen, oh, my back catalog seems to get 50 downloads per episode per month. We saw these things that we could have dug into, but there's so many more things for us to work on. When things like transcription isn't easy to get into, we just skip it, right? So many of the things in podcasting, there's so many easier paths. There's so many easier ways to chase. When it's too much money to buy in and prove the idea and the R&D around it, and then you bring it to market and it adds a $2 CPM to whatever you're doing, and the advertiser doesn't want to pay for it and the publisher doesn't want to pay for it, It's a lot of wasted time and money. That's a lot of commitment there. So being able to quickly utilize something, even if it's potentially a higher price for single usage type stuff, it's the ease of being able to just get what you need and being able to see what it is. And one of the big things I'm very thankful that you guys have been very open to all this is I push you guys on that efficiency play, right? Like the way this wins isn't with it all being, everybody being charged as an island and it reprocessing everything, but it's the efficiency of, does this become a pool, right? A lot of people in the chat had been part of an IAB project where we tried to do that, and the technology moves so quickly that I think that solutions like this can be that endpoint that anybody, it's faster to just make it available or have it available for everybody quickly than it is to create a whole industry standard around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we were dealing with this. We know others were as well, where a lot of people are trying to transcribe the same episode for many different purposes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we think this could go as well, is like not just like the ASR technology piece of it, not just like the quality of the transcript and the features associated with it, but how can we create more of like a collaborative community around it and be like, we understand that this is not just an audio file. We understand that this represents an episode that you need access to, but also so do you over here. And how can we create, economies of scale if we're able to kind of open it up as an access type model for that. A lot of challenges, a lot of stuff that we're thinking through, but certainly where we think we can go.
Yeah. And I mean, most of these publishers that are doing really well here have some sort of semblance of a text-based or website-based solution or offering, or have interacted with them, right? Their teams have done that too. I mean, almost all of these tools out there were built around visibility into text, right? Like the IAS double verify emote type tools are based on reading what the web page says. That's what a transcript is, right? It's the web page equivalent of that.
Right.
Tonality and digging into those aspects there, right? That gives it another layer, more depth, more insight into it. And that becomes the interesting thing. Does that matter? How does that matter? What do we like? What happens when you layer that onto attribution? An attribution partner pulls it in and says, these shows did way better. This specific ad read did way better. When we look at the transcription and we see the tonality, this is the inflection that made a difference. This was, all of these other metrics pulled together. That really excites me.
Yeah. Yeah. That measurement and verification, it's like, this is where obviously Sounders felt like the podcast industry has a long way to go, and we've like tried to get us there. But thinking about it, that seems just like a perfect fit for this kind of transcript use case, being able to understand why something performed well or why something performed poorly. Just makes a whole lot of sense.
And I mean, a lot of this too, contextual is seen by a lot of people as a way to safeguard against potential loss of the IP address in the future. Now, I personally believe that there are far bigger industries out there that are going to be hurt way more than we are from losing access to the IP, right? Like Apple's Private Relay and the Google solutions, like that's going to hurt some major websites way before it does us. So maybe they can fight the advertising fight for us and we can benefit there. But like, I know AdsWiz and Acast have integrated with ComScore's Proximic, which matches the contextualization of the show to contextual based segments from the other media that ComScore is out there ingesting. That's cool, right? The problem today with some of that is that it's not always going to be super efficient and affordable. But by making these solutions more aggressive on making it, this becomes table stakes. It is priced appropriately to just absorb it. Then it's not about, okay, who pays for it? It's, okay, who can use it best, right? If I'm a publisher and I utilize this to best improve campaigns, I will win more business. Whereas today, until these things become better adopted and more priced appropriate, it's, okay, do I take the risk and pay for it and believe that this is the right thing to optimize off of? Or do I ask the advertiser to pay for it? And what happens if they won't pay for it? Then I just don't do it and I don't have a value prop.
Right.
So I'm excited about, I guess, kind of the cheapness of step one, because I think that whoever really makes that incredibly affordable and accessible to prove a point, they're going to be the next people also to figure out what are some baseline insights, right? What every step we go forward that becomes table stakes, we get to move away from that being a unique value prop, and we get to push all of the individual companies to come up with more interesting and more dynamic views on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to save time for
Yeah.
Q&A from the crowd, but just real quick on that, like, it's so true. And there are so many things where the podcast industry feels late to innovation on a lot of these things, especially on the ad tech side. But like having a platform or a solution where we can kind of start the right way, like you talked about IPs going away, like if we can start with that in mind, that future, even we let other people fight the battle and extend that runway, it's a cool opportunity. It saves us a lot of headache of having to rebuild things multiple times.
Yeah, we don't have to save the world. We just have to improve our space. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear questions. I mean, we got a great turnout of people in the room. I know it can take a little bit to get ideas up there, and I know that we were talking about this in the abstract, but I think if anybody has questions about Sounder API or about thoughts about the space in general, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'll open it up to you all.
Well, I'll ask you a question on this. One of the things you said was that it starts with transcription. What's the roadmap plan to release through the API past transcription?
Yeah, because we see the transcript, like we've said, as the building block for a lot of these different features. But where Sounder has really focused over the past couple of years is around classification, understanding what is being spoken about in what context. So through this same API mechanism, we want to make it so that it's equally open. People have the ability to understand, not just get their transcript back. They want to, be able to grab brand suitability data. They want to be able to grab classification data, understand, who's being spoken about and in what context. We also have, our whole, a whole other product we have around the promotion hub, which is more direct for podcast creators, helping them automate the generation of promotional assets, show notes, episode descriptions. So that can all feed through this API mechanism, creating a lot of different ways that people can further iterate on our generative AI aspects as well. So a lot through here. And then the big one, I think, is creating that economy of scale and understanding that this is not just a file that's being transcribed. This is an episode. And here's how other people can access these assets.
With thinking about it as a pathway for, I guess, everybody to utilize for transcription, and you're going to provide your own flavor of like the contextualization and brand safety and all the classifications. Are you thinking about it more as a platform as well, where you'll invite in other partners and peers like Seeker, Barometer, NewsGuard, those partners out there that are doing those types of classifications?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think if people are using us for transcription, but not for our classification because they have their own models in place, we welcome that. If they're using us for the full stack, then that's great as well. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to do with this is place a stake in the ground, get past that step one of like, we've got a common way to access such a foundational piece with transcription. But we also make it easy to access Sounder, like natural language processing data as well.
That's great.
We've only got a minute left. If anybody has a question, please feel free to jump in. I will also say, I'll throw the contact info up here as well from an earlier slide. If you guys think of anything or want to have any further conversations about anything we covered today, feel free to reach out. You can, as I said, learn more about our API from our website. You can contact Tim if you have specific questions that you want to follow up on. And like Bryan said, we look forward to the South by Southwest X podcasting event on March 9th. Awesome. I think that's all the time we have.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Bryan. Hope you have a good one.
You too.
Thank you all for joining.